All right, so today's lesson is going to be how we go from tables to equations. So yesterday in the assignment we did yesterday, you were talking about tables and so forth. And so we're going to continue that a bit today as well. The first thing we'll do is kind of review a bit the parts of a table. So let's go right here. So the parts of a table is this, right? You have your x value. You have your x value, which is also known as your input and your independent value. So you'll hear me call it the input, you hear call me x or independent, they all mean the same thing. As you're working in your science class, you have your independent and your dependent, right? And so it goes back to your x value, your input, and your output, right? And so we'll be talking about that. The next part that we have is our process or rule. Now, this is not always drawn or given to you. This space right here for your process or rule is not always given to you. They are going to be given to you right here in the beginning because it's an important part of the table, but a lot of times they don't show that part, okay? So the process or your rule would go there, also known as an expression as well. As an expression, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, of course, you have your y, which is your output, which, of course, you know, your x and y have a relationship, right? Your input, and then your y is your output. The x is your independent, and your y your dependent. This number here that you get on a table depends on whatever happens in my input. Depends on my x value. If I input an x into my table, I'm going to get a certain y. And so that's what were the parts of the table. We have our input, and we have our x, our input, our independent, and we have our y, output, and dependent. All right, so fill in the question below, and then we'll move on to the next video in a minute. So there are two types of relationships that we're going to be talking about, okay? Additive and multiplicative. Those are the two types, and those are the only two types that we are focusing on in sixth grade math. For pre-AP, we'll be talking about some other things a little bit later on, but right now we're only focusing on additive and multiplicative. So let's just look at additive. Let's just look at additive real quick. So on additive, you are adding or subtracting the input value. And what I mean by that is like this. So in this case is x plus 5. So that's a form of you're adding to the x value, to your input value. If you remember back to our tables, it can be the input or it can be the independent value. Or you could be subtracting, so x plus 5 or x minus 3. That's an additive relationship, right? It could also be written as y is equal to 5 plus x as well. Either one is still additive. And the other one that we're going to talk about is right here, which is multiplicative. Multiplicative is when you are multiplying or dividing the input value. So some examples of that would be y equals 2 times x, or y is equal to x divided by 4. You might also see it as y equals 1/4 times x, okay? Those are all multiplicative, and those are the only two type of relationships that we'll be talking about in this lesson.